Ambassador Elena Chen felt her heart hammering against her ribs as the human shuttle docked with the colossal hegemony diplomatic vessel. Through the viewport, the alien ship stretched beyond comprehension, its hull adorned with the conquest markers of 1,000 subjugated worlds. Earth's most advanced spacecraft looked like a child's toy beside it. Final approach. Ambassador, the pilot announced, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from the entire crew. Atmospheric compatibility confirmed. They're pressurizing the dock with our mix. Elena straightened her formal diplomatic uniform, touching the small Earth insignia pinned above her heart. 6 months of crash course xenolinguistics and alien cultural studies had led to this moment. She was humanity's voice, chosen for her background in international negotiations and unflappable demeanor. Remember, her assistant Marcus whispered, the Vexarians interpret eye contact as a challenge. The Mithrani expect small talk before business. And I remember. Elena interrupted gently. 27 distinct cultural protocols, 7 species with conflicting customs, and we're expected to navigate them all while they need make no effort to accommodate ours. Her smile was tight. Asymmetric diplomacy at its finest. The airlock cycled open, revealing a delegation of alien representatives. The Vexarian leader towered nearly 3 meters tall, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. Compound eyes assessed her with cold calculation as multiple limbs performed greeting gestures simultaneously. Human ambassador, the translation device rendered in a flat monotone. You honor us with your primitive presence. Elena didn't flinch at the insult embedded in the greeting. The xenolinguists had warned her that hegemony languages contained hierarchical markers that automatically classified new species. The United Nations of Earth extends greetings to the Galactic hegemony. She replied with perfect diplomatic neutrality. We come seeking mutual understanding and beneficial exchange. The delegation led her through corridors designed to intimidate, ceilings unnecessarily high, architecture emphasizing the insignificance of the visitor. Elena noted the subtle details, how servant species kept their eyes downcast, how the ruling 7 species displayed dominance through spatial positioning. The xenopsychology briefings hadn't exaggerated the hegemony's rigid hierarchy. The council chamber itself was a masterpiece of psychological warfare disguised as architecture. 7 thrones for the ruling species arranged in precise order of dominance, with Elena's designated spot conspicuously lower, a physical representation of where they believe humanity belonged. The Galactic hegemony has reviewed your species' development trajectory. The Vexarian High Speaker began without preamble. Despite achieving rudimentary space travel, your technological advancement remains approximately 842 standard cycles behind minimum hegemony participation thresholds. Elena waited, knowing interruption would be interpreted as proof of human impulsiveness. However, the Mithrani delegate interjected with what the briefings had described as their species' version of magnanimity. The Council has voted to offer Earth Protectorate status, a generous accommodation. The term scrolled across Elena's translator. Resource extraction rights in Earth's solar system granted to hegemony corporations, limited technology transfers focused on resource harvesting efficiency, Earth-based manufacturing to serve hegemony supply chains, and governance assistance from appointed hegemony administrators. Protectorate status is typically reserved for species demonstrating promising potential. The aquatic Julan representative added, their voice bubbling through specialized breathing apparatus. Consider this an honor. Elena studied the document, maintaining careful control over her expression. The protectorate status was colonial exploitation dressed in diplomatic language. Earth would effectively become a resource colony with humans as the labor force. The United Nations thanks the hegemony for this offer, she began carefully. However, Earth seeks full membership with independent status, as outlined in our initial communication. We believe mutual trade and cultural exchange would benefit both our civilizations. A ripple of what she recognized as amusement moved through the council. The Vexarians' mandibles clicked rapidly, their equivalent of laughter. Independent status is earned through demonstrated technological or strategic value. The high speaker explained as one might to a child. Your species still employs combustion engines and has barely touched your own satellite. Your digital systems are primitive, your energy production inefficient. What precisely do you offer that would warrant equal standing? Elena felt a flash of anger, but channeled it into her diplomatic training. Humanity offers unique perspectives. Our scientific method, our cultural diversity, our adaptive problem-solving. All species believe themselves special. Ambassador Chen, the Mithrani interrupted. It is the nature of evolutionary psychology. The hegemony has catalogued over 4,000 sentient species. The pattern is consistent. Elena stood straighter, looking directly at each council member despite the cultural taboo. Then perhaps the hegemony would benefit from our inconsistency. Humanity's history is marked by overcoming limitations others thought insurmountable. We respectfully decline protectorate status and request reconsideration of our application for independent membership. Silence fell across the chamber. The ruling species exchanged glances that Elena couldn't interpret but suspected contained disbelief at her audacity. You decline. The Vexarian's translator seemed to struggle with the concept. This is unprecedented. Humanity specializes in unprecedented actions. Elena replied with a diplomatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. We would rather stand alone than kneel together. As she turned to leave, the Mithrani delegate whispered to his aide, not realizing human hearing could detect it. The human female showed no fear. How peculiar for a primitive. Behind her placid expression, Elena knew what would happen next. The hegemony's pattern was clear from their historical records. Species that refused protectorate status were typically given a demonstration of hegemony power to reconsider. But what the records didn't account for was how humanity responded to threats. They would learn soon enough. Admiral James Okoro stood motionless before the holographic display dominating Earth's unified command center, his weathered face illuminated by the pulsing red alert indicators. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Chen's return from the failed negotiations. 3 months of frantic preparation, of nations setting aside centuries of rivalry to face an existential threat. Confirm visual, he ordered, his voice carrying the calm of a man who had faced combat on 6 continents. The tactical officer enhanced the feed from the Jupiter Observatory. 17 vessels, sir. Largest is approximately 4 kilometers in length. They're ignoring all hails on standard and the frequencies the ambassador provided. On the display, the hegemony mining fleet moved through the asteroid belt with disturbing efficiency. Massive ships extended harvesting appendages that shattered asteroids into manageable fragments, extracting metals and silicates with technology centuries beyond human capability. Resources that Earth had been planning to harvest for its own expansion vanished into the maws of alien vessels. The Constantine and Gagarin are approaching the extraction zone now, Admiral, his XO reported. Captain Singh reports they're maintaining the non-aggressive approach pattern as instructed. Okoro nodded, though his instincts screamed that this was wrong. The Constantine and Gagarin represented humanity's most advanced spacecraft, fusion-powered exploration vessels retrofitted with the best weapons Earth could produce. Against the hegemony fleet, they were little more than gnats approaching a hurricane. We're receiving video transmission from the Constantine, the communications officer announced. On screen, Captain Singh's face appeared, determination evident despite the static interference. Command, we've established visual contact with the extraction fleet. They continue to ignore communications. We're moving to intervention position Alpha to establish presence. These are our resources, and we. A blinding flash washed out the transmission. When the video stabilized, Singh was gone. The bridge behind him was open to vacuum. Edges of metal glowing, where energy weapons had sliced through the hull like tissue paper. Seconds later, the Gagarin vanished in a similar flash. 842 lives extinguished in under 5 seconds. The command center fell silent. Okoro gripped the edge of the tactical table until his knuckles whitened. On the main screen, the hegemony vessels continued their methodical harvesting operation without pause, as if the destruction of 2 human ships was so inconsequential it didn't warrant interrupting their work. Incoming transmission, the communications officer whispered. All frequencies, all Earth languages simultaneously. The alien message displayed across every screen in the command center. Undeveloped worlds have no property rights beyond their atmosphere. Continued interference will result in orbital sanitation procedures. Behind Okoro, the door to the command center slid open. He didn't need to turn to know who had entered. The families of the Constantine and Gagarin crews had been in a nearby briefing room, waiting for news of first contact with the alien vessels. "They're dead, aren't they?" The voice belonged to Dr. Elise Singh, the captain's wife and chief xenobiologist for the Defense Department. Okoro turned, meeting her eyes and the eyes of the other families. Where he expected to see grief, he instead saw something far more dangerous: cold fury. "Yes," he answered simply, without warning or provocation. Dr. Singh nodded once. "Then we stopped playing by their rules." Within hours, an emergency United Nations Security Council convened. For the first time in human history, the vote was unanimous across all 193 member nations. Nations that had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for decades now shared military secrets. Scientists who had competed for grants now collaborated across borders. "They've studied our broadcasts," Okoro told the assembled Global Defense Council. "Our entertainment, our news, our public communications. They believe they understand what humanity is capable of." He gestured to the displays showing Chinese and American space fleets deploying together, Russian and European defense systems linking into a unified network, Indian and Pakistani engineers working side by side on weapon modifications. "But they've mistaken our fiction for our limits. They've confused our peaceful restraint for weakness." He looked around the room at representatives from every major military power on Earth. "And they've forgotten a fundamental truth that runs through all human history. Nothing unites rivals faster than a common enemy." As the meeting adjourned, Ambassador Chen approached him. "The hegemony has a protocol for species that resist," she said quietly. "They call it measured educational response. This attack was designed to teach us our place." Okoro's smile contained no warmth. "Then perhaps it's time we taught them about humanity." Admiral Zolax lounged in the ornate command chair of the hegemony warship Inevitable Dominance, his chidnous limbs arranged in the traditional posture of a superior observing inferiors. The holographic displays surrounding him showed human vessels fleeing the solar system in disorganized patterns. As expected, he remarked to his command staff, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Primitives always run when shown their place in the natural order." His secondary limbs gestured dismissively at the tactical display. "Maintain minimum security profile. The harvest can proceed without further interruption." The Vexarian admiral had overseen 17 planetary subjugations in his distinguished career. The pattern never varied: show overwhelming force, eliminate any resistance, establish resource extraction, and eventually the primitives accepted their role in the hegemony's grand design. Humans would be no different. "Admiral," his sensor officer called, voice tinged with confusion. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the fleeing human vessels. They appear to be accelerating toward our supply convoy in Sector 9. Zolax's compound eyes shifted toward the secondary display. "Impossible. Their propulsion technology can't." The communications array erupted with distress signals as the supply convoy's feed cut to static. Moments later, radiation alarms screamed across multiple sectors of hegemony-controlled space. "Report," Zolax demanded, rising to his full height. "The human vessels. They detonated their reactor cores." The tactical officer stammered. "A breach of hegemony military protocol that would normally result in immediate demotion." They were carrying minimal crews on what appeared to be suicide trajectories. Our supply ships had lowered shields to conserve energy as per standard protocol for secure space. The strategic display updated, showing coordinated strikes across 7 systems. Hegemony supply lines erupted in nuclear fire as miniature human vessels, nearly invisible to standard sensors, sacrificed themselves in precisely calculated attacks. "Impossible," Zolax whispered. Their technological development timeline suggested they were at least a century from developing stealth technology capable of evading our sensors. "Sir, we're receiving reports of human vessels using modified versions of hegemony weaponry," his intelligence officer reported. "Analysis suggests they've reverse-engineered components from salvage of our minor vessels." In 2 weeks, the admiral's mandibles clacked in disbelief. That process takes years, even for advanced species. Across his command center, reports flooded in of unconventional attacks targeting hegemony infrastructure. Human tactics defied all established military doctrine. Where hegemony strategy relied on overwhelming force applied to critical targets, humans struck at seemingly random points with minimal resources, creating cascading failures throughout carefully optimized systems. The Mithrani liaison officer approached Zolax's command platform, breaking protocol in his urgency. "Admiral, Intelligence Command has completed its analysis of human behavioral patterns." The officer's scales had paled to a sickly hue. "We have catastrophically misinterpreted their cultural transmissions." Zolax gestured for elaboration. "The thousands of simulated conflicts we intercepted in their broadcasts, what we categorized as entertainment, their strategic exercises. Their species creates endless variations of warfare scenarios as recreation." The Mithrani's voice dropped. "Their entire history is an unbroken chain of conflict and adaptation. Where our species fought to establish dominance hierarchies and then stabilized, humans never stopped fighting, never stopped evolving their methods." On the main display, a captured hegemony scout ship appeared, now modified with crude but effective human weapons. Impossibly, it was using hegemony identification codes that should have taken decades to decrypt. "Their technology is primitive," the Mithrani continued, "but their application is disturbing. They're using surgical strikes with nuclear weapons detonated inside our shields. They're employing single-pilot craft on suicide runs that cripple vessels 1,000 times their size. Our prisoners report human operators continuing to fight despite injuries that would incapacitate any rational species." Zolax's compound eyes narrowed as the implications became clear. The hegemony had based its expansion on a fundamental principle, that rational species surrendered when faced with superior force and technology. Humans were applying a different calculation entirely, one where individual survival was subordinate to collective success. "We did not encounter a primitive species," the Mithrani whispered. "We encountered a civilization shaped by constant warfare, disguised beneath a veneer of diplomacy." On the strategic display, 3 more hegemony supply convoys winked out of existence as human vessels, too small to be considered threats under normal doctrine, detonated their cores in precisely calculated proximity. "Adjust tactical doctrine," Zolax ordered, his voice now carrying the appropriate gravity. "Treat all human contacts as primary threats regardless of size or apparent capability." And he hesitated. "Request reinforcements from the High Command. Inform them this subjugation will require significantly more resources than initially projected." As his orders were relayed, the Admiral studied the tactical display, showing the expanding sphere of human counterattacks. The hegemony had encountered resistance before, but always predictable, always following established patterns of warfare. This was something different, something unprecedented. Humans didn't fight to establish dominance. They fought to win, by any means necessary. Dr. Maya Patel stood in reverent silence within the captured hegemony vessel's knowledge repository. Holographic displays surrounded her, containing the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 worlds spanning millennia of galactic history. Any other time, she would have been overcome with academic excitement. Today, she searched for weaknesses. Their technology isn't magical. She explained to the assembled military leaders and scientists gathered in the repurposed alien chamber. It stopped evolving 5 centuries ago because they eliminated all threats and competition. She gestured to a hovering display, showing the hegemony's technological development curve, a steep incline followed by a nearly flat line. Look at their weapons systems, the same basic designs for over 300 years, just scaled up in power. Their shield technology hasn't fundamentally changed in 8 generations of their species. Admiral Okoro studied the displays with narrowed eyes. You're saying they've stagnated? Precisely, Maya confirmed, pushing her glasses up her nose. The hegemony's greatest strength is also their critical weakness, stability. They've created such a rigid hierarchy that innovation is actively discouraged. New ideas must filter through 7 levels of bureaucracy before implementation. She brought up comparative schematics of hegemony vessels. Their ships are marvels of engineering, but they're designed for optimal function within known parameters. They have no redundancy, no adaptability. Everything is interconnected in the most efficient possible configuration. Efficient systems are vulnerable systems, muttered General Chen, Ambassador Chen's brother and Earth's foremost expert on asymmetric warfare. One unexpected variable cascades through the entire structure. Maya nodded emphatically, and humans specialize in unexpected variables. Their tactics haven't evolved because they haven't faced a species that fights like we do. They expect enemies to engage according to logical risk assessment. She pulled up intercepted hegemony tactical communications. Look here, their commanders express confusion that our pilots continue fighting with unsurvivable injuries. They can't comprehend why our engineers would sacrifice themselves to reverse engineer their technology. Their species evolved through dominance hierarchies where individual survival drives all behavior. Dr. Weizong, the quantum physicist responsible for analyzing hegemony FTL communications, stepped forward. We've identified another critical vulnerability. Their entire command structure relies on instantaneous faster-than-light communication. Every decision filters down from central command. Individual ship captains have minimal tactical autonomy. He gestured to a device in the center of the room, a hybrid of human and alien technology cobbled together from salvaged components. This is the quantum disruptor. It creates a localized field that severs their FTL communications for approximately 17 minutes before their systems adapt. The device pulsed with an unearthly blue glow as Y activated it. Immediately, the captured alien consoles in the room flickered and went dark. During this window, their ships cannot receive orders from Central Command. Their contingency protocols are rudimentary: maintain position, establish defensive formation, await instructions. Admiral Okoro approached the device, studying it with thoughtful intensity. 17 minutes against an enemy that expects perfect coordination. 17 minutes against ships designed without redundant systems, Maya added. 17 minutes where their perfect efficiency becomes perfect vulnerability. Okoro nodded slowly, his mind already formulating strategies. Dr. Patel, what else have you learned about their psychology that we can exploit? Maya brought up behavioral studies compiled from prisoner interrogations and captured records. They interpret certain human behaviors as irrational or impossible. They cannot comprehend why we would sacrifice individual lives for collective advantage. Their species evolved to preserve the strongest individuals, while humans evolved through group cooperation. She displayed footage of a hegemony commander's confusion when human prisoners refuse to provide information despite torture. They expect rational self-preservation above all else. When we don't follow that pattern, their tactical doctrine has no contingency. Okoro stared at the ancient Earth map displayed on his terminal, battles where the outnumbered had prevailed against overwhelming odds. Thermopylae, Agincourt, Midway. Instances where humanity's propensity for sacrifice, innovation, and adaptability had overcome superior numbers and technology. We won't win by becoming them, he told the assembled leaders. We'll win by remaining human, by being everything they don't expect and can't understand. He turned to the tactical display showing the current positions of hegemony forces throughout the solar system. Coordinate with Dr. Zhang's team to deploy the quantum disruptors across all engagement zones. General Chen, prepare your asymmetric warfare units for simultaneous strikes on their supply networks. The Admiral's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of each person present. The hegemony believes this conflict will follow their established pattern, overwhelming force leading to inevitable submission. They expect us to either fight conventionally and lose, or surrender and accept our place. His smile contained no warmth. Instead, we'll show them something they've never seen in their 1,000 years of conquest. A species that turns their own perfection against them, that sacrifices the few to save the many, that adapts faster than they can respond. He glanced at the tactical display one final time, where a hegemony battle group approached the Jupiter defense perimeter. Humanity has been fighting itself for our entire history. Now we finally have someone else to fight. He nodded to his communications officer. Implement Operation Europa. Let's show them how dangerous humans really are. Commander Sofia Rodriguez felt the vibration of her vessel's engines through the command chair as the human fleet took position in Europa's shadow. The icy moon's radiation-heavy environment provided natural camouflage against hegemony sensors, allowing the 27 Earth vessels to remain undetected as the alien battle group approached Jupiter's orbit. All ships reporting ready. Commander, her tactical officer reported. Quantum disruptors synchronized in charge. Sophia surveyed the holographic display showing their carefully orchestrated trap. The hegemony fleet, 14 warships arranged in their standard hierarchical formation, moved with the absolute confidence of predators who had never become prey. Remember, she addressed her crew, knowing the same message was being relayed across the fleet. Today we don't fight for ourselves. We fight for every human life they dismissed as expendable. We fight to show them humanity cannot be categorized by their algorithms or predicted by their models. She nodded to her communications officer. Execute Phase 1. Across the void, 5 small human vessels broke formation, appearing to flee from Jupiter's orbital defense platforms. Their erratic course, leaking radiation and broadcasting distress signals on frequencies they knew the hegemony monitored, presented the perfect bait. The hegemony response came swiftly. Their battle group adjusted course to intercept, weapons powering up to eliminate what their tactical doctrine categorized as damaged enemy assets, easy targets to be destroyed before the main engagement. They're moving into position. Sophia's XO confirmed. Disruptor range in 30 seconds. On her command display, the countdown synchronized across all human vessels. Concealed beneath Europa's icy crust, Dr. Zhang's team monitored the quantum field generators, ready to trigger the disruption that would sever the hegemony fleet from their command structure. Phase 2 on my mark, Sophia ordered as the aliens crossed the invisible threshold. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The waters of Europa seemed to shimmer as the quantum disruptors activated simultaneously. On the tactical display, the hegemony communication network vanished in an instant, replaced by localized emergency protocols. Disruptors functioning at optimal capacity, her science officer confirmed. Hegemony fleet is isolated for 16 minutes and counting. Deploy all vessels, combat pattern Thermopylae. Sophia commanded. What followed stunned even veteran hegemony warriors watching from their command decks. Human ships emerged from Europa's shadow, not in the conventional formation they expected, but in seemingly chaotic patterns that shifted faster than targeting systems could adjust. The 5 damaged vessels suddenly accelerated with impossible speed, their reactor signatures having masked the true power of their newly modified engines. Close to minimum effective distance, Sophia ordered as her vessel, the Armstrong, accelerated toward the largest hegemony warship. Weapons free, selective targeting only. We want prisoners and salvage, not debris. Human vessels executed combat maneuvers that hegemony tactical systems classified as non-survivable, pulling gravitational forces that would kill most species. The truth that human pilots were using experimental medical stasis systems that allowed them to endure these forces for short periods was another secret weapon the aliens couldn't have anticipated. Sending targeting solutions to all vessels, her tactical officer announced, focusing on propulsion and command modules as prioritized. The hegemony fleet, operating on emergency protocols without central command guidance, formed a defensive sphere, textbook response to unexpected attack. But the formation, designed to repel conventional assaults from capital ships, left them vulnerable to the swarms of microsatellites that human vessels now deployed. These tiny weapons, barely larger than torpedoes, carried targeting systems specifically calibrated to hegemony shield harmonics. They slipped through defensive screens designed to stop larger threats, attaching to hull sections where they delivered precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses. First wave of microsats reporting successful deployment, the tactical officer announced. 7 hegemony vessels experiencing critical systems failure. On her display, Sophia watched as the carefully coordinated dance unfolded. Human ships that appeared to retreat were actually repositioning for the next phase. Vessels that seemed damaged were executing deliberate deception protocols. The hegemony flagship is attempting to coordinate the defensive response, her communications officer reported. They're trying to establish short-range communications to compensate for the quantum disruption. Perfect, Sophia replied. Deploy Phase 3. From the Armstrong's launch bay, specialized boarding craft deployed, their hulls reinforced with salvaged hegemony armor. Within them, combat teams prepared for the most audacious aspect of the plan, capturing rather than destroying key enemy vessels. When the hegemony flagship attempted to retreat, they discovered human engineers had reconfigured their own engine harmonics against them. The microsatellites had delivered specialized code that triggered cascade failures through systems too perfectly optimized to contain unexpected variables. Hegemony vessels reporting multiple critical failures, her tactical officer announced, unable to keep the note of triumph from his voice. Their shields are failing sequentially. Boarding parties have breached the command vessel. Sophia allowed herself a moment of fierce satisfaction as the battle unfolded exactly as Admiral Okoro had predicted. The hegemony's perfect efficiency had become their perfect vulnerability. Their inability to adapt to unexpected variables had become their downfall. All ships, maintain formation and continue selective targeting, she ordered. The quantum disruption window closes in 4 minutes. Let's make sure when they regain communications, all they can do is surrender. The Battle of Europa ended not with humanity's extinction, but with the unprecedented surrender of 37 hegemony vessels. For the first time in their 1,000-year history of expansion, the Galactic hegemony had suffered a decisive defeat. As Sophia stood on the captured bridge of the hegemony flagship, facing its commander across the command deck, she saw something she'd been told was impossible. Fear in the compound eyes of a Vexarian. How? The alien commander asked simply. You studied our entertainment, Sophia replied. You should have studied our history. The secret meeting took place on a rogue planet drifting in the darkness between stars, far from hegemony sensor networks. Dr. Maya Patel checked the environmental seals on her suit one final time before the airlock cycled open to the alien delegation chamber. Behind her, Admiral Okoro and a small team of Earth's diplomatic and military representatives prepared to make first contact of an entirely different kind. Remember, Maya cautioned, these species have suffered under hegemony rule for generations. Their trust must be earned, not assumed. The inner door slid open to reveal a chamber specifically designed to accommodate multiple biological requirements simultaneously. 3 distinct environmental zones house representatives from species classified in hegemony records as permanently subjugated. Maya's translator device hummed as it processed the complex biochemical signals emanating from the insectoid Cantari delegation. Their hive intelligence manifested through a queen mind surrounded by specialized drones, each serving as sensory organs for their collective consciousness. The human resistance continues to exceed hegemony predictive models. The queen mind communicated through shifting patterns of bioluminescence that Maya's algorithms converted to speech. Your bodies are soft, yet you fight with the resolve of stone. In the aquatic environment opposite them, the Delphians floated in pressurized chambers of methane-rich liquid. Their translucent bodies pulsed with neural patterns that Maya recognized as mathematical calculations of extraordinary complexity. "We have observed 17 distinct tactical innovations in your conflict methodology," the Delphian representative transmitted. "The hegemony requires an average of 4.7 standard cycles to adapt to a single innovation. You have created 17 in less than 1/4 cycle." The third environment housed the crystalline Zin, beings of living silicon who communicated through precisely modulated energy pulses. Their faceted bodies refracted light in patterns that conveyed meaning alongside their more conventional transmissions. Your species was categorized as pre-ascension primitives, the Zin Elders' energy patterns translated. Yet you have disabled hegemony vessels that subjugated our world for 3,000 cycles. We would understand this apparent contradiction. Admiral Okoro stepped forward. The hegemony misunderstood humanity's fundamental nature. They saw our technological limitations but failed to recognize our adaptive capacity. We've come seeking allies who understand what it means to resist their dominance. Maya's algorithms worked frantically to translate human concepts of freedom, dignity, and self-determination into frameworks that would resonate with these diverse species. The challenge wasn't merely linguistic but conceptual, teaching ideas that the hegemony had systematically suppressed for generations. The Kantari were conquered because our hive minds refused individual subservience. The queen mind communicated. The hegemony cannot comprehend collective consciousness that values all components equally. The Delphians predicted hegemony expansion patterns, their representative added, and warned other species. We were subjugated for disrupting the natural order of civilization development. The Zin refused to provide energy manipulation technology for hegemony weapons. The Elders' crystals pulsed. We chose eternal enslavement over participation in galactic conquest. Understanding dawned across Maya's face. You were all conquered for the same reason, refusing to accept hegemony hierarchy. The various alien representatives signaled agreement through their distinct communication methods. "Then we have more in common than differences," Admiral Okoro stated. "Humanity seeks not to replace the hegemony's dominance with our own, but to create a new order where diverse species determine their own futures." The skepticism from the alien representatives was palpable even through translation algorithms. "Your species lacks the technology to challenge hegemony dominance beyond your local sector," the Delphian calculated. "Victory probability remains below sustainable thresholds." "Technology can be developed," Okoro countered. "What the hegemony fears most is what we bring to this potential alliance: unpredictability, adaptability, and a willingness to risk everything for abstract concepts like freedom." The chamber fell silent as the various species processed this declaration. The Kantari Queen Mind's drones circled in increasingly complex patterns as they communicated internally. The Delphians' neural pathways pulsed with rapid calculations. The Zin Elders' crystalline structure shifted to capture different light wavelengths for analysis. Finally, the Queen Mind spoke. "We will provide biological technology that enhances neural processing and organic mechanical integration. Knowledge forbidden by the hegemony for 8,000 cycles." The Delphians offer predictive navigation systems, their representative added. "We can calculate hegemony fleet movements with 97.8% accuracy within temporal limitations. The Zin will share energy manipulation principles. The Elders' crystals pulsed with increased intensity. Your species may adapt these to your weapon systems more efficiently than the hegemony could predict." The alliance formed not through formal treaties but through shared stories of resistance. The oppressed species provided technologies humans could never have developed independently, while humans offered something equally valuable: unpredictable battle strategies and a willingness to sacrifice for abstract principles. Within months, hegemony supply lines collapsed across multiple sectors as rebellions erupted across systems where victory had seemed mathematically impossible. The Vexarian High Speaker received increasingly alarming reports. Cantary swarms using human-inspired guerrilla tactics. Delphian navigators guiding primitive human vessels through supposedly impenetrable defenses. Zin crystals powering weapons that shouldn't exist in human hands for centuries. For the first time in recorded history, a Vexarian experienced genuine fear as he reviewed footage of a human commander standing alongside representatives from all three permanently subjugated species on the bridge of a captured hegemony warship. The species that had been carefully separated by the hegemony for millennia were now united under a single purpose, and at their center stood the most dangerous species of all, one that transformed anger into innovation and treated former enemies as equals rather than subjects. The Hegemony Council chamber had never known chaos until this moment. The 7 ruling species, accustomed to orderly deliberation within rigid hierarchical protocols, now shouted over one another as reports of simultaneous rebellions across 32 star systems scrolled across the central display. This contagion of resistance must be excised immediately, the Vexarian High Speaker declared, mandibles clicking in agitation. I call for deployment of the Extinction Fleet. A collective silence fell across the chamber. The Extinction Fleet, planet killers held in reserve for only the most extreme threats to hegemony dominance, had been deployed only twice in their 1,000-year history. The humans must be eliminated regardless of cost, the High Speaker continued, before their contamination spreads further. The vote, for the first time in Council history, was unanimous. The humans had achieved what no other species had managed in millennia. They had united the Hegemony Council in fear. Admiral Okoro stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Defiance, studying the tactical display with Dr. Patel and representatives from their allied species. Intelligence from the Delphian Predictive Network had warned them of the coming assault. The Extinction Fleet carries weapons capable of rendering planetary surfaces uninhabitable, the Delphian representative calculated, neural patterns flickering with grim mathematics. Conventional defense strategies have a success probability of 0.87%. Then we'll use unconventional strategies, Okoro replied. He turned to the Zen crystal matrix hovering beside him. Is the quantum phase project operational? The Zen Elder's facets pulsed with cautious affirmation. The combined efforts of human quantum physicists and Zen energy manipulation have created something previously theorized but never achieved, localized space-time distortion fields. Without oversimplification, Dr. Patel added, we can create bubbles of altered physics that will trap the hegemony fleet in zones where their weapons and drives function unpredictably or not at all. The Cantary Queen Mine's primary drone shifted its bioluminescent patterns. Our modified stealth technology will conceal the deployment platforms until activation. The hegemony will see only what they expect to see, a seemingly undefended Earth awaiting extermination. Okoro nodded grimly. Let's spring the trap. The hegemony extinction fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, 87 vessels arranged in precise hierarchical pattern. At their center, the planet-killer platforms pulsed with barely contained energy. From his command throne aboard the inevitable Retribution, Commander Trazik surveyed the blue-green world below. His sensors detected no significant military presence, just scattered settlements and primitive infrastructure, exactly as expected. The humans appear to have recalled their forces to defend their homeworld, his tactical officer reported. Defensive capability is minimal. Resistance will be symbolic at best. Begin planetary bombardment, Trazik ordered. Standard extinction protocol. As the first weapons began powering up, reality itself seemed to twist around the hegemony fleet. Space distorted in impossible patterns as the hidden quantum phase generators activated simultaneously. Vessels that had been perfectly aligned suddenly occupied overlapping space, shields interfering with one another. Weapon systems that required precise spatial calculations failed as the very fabric of space-time fluctuated unpredictably. What is happening? Trazik demanded as alarms blared across his command deck. Report. Unknown technology is altering local space-time geometry. his science officer stammered. "Our vessels are trapped in bubbles of altered physics. Weapons and drives are malfunctioning or offline entirely." From the darkness emerged hybrid vessels of human design enhanced with alien technology, crewed by all 4 allied species. They moved through the distorted space with precision impossible for ships not specifically calibrated to these conditions. The battle became a desperate last stand as Admiral Okoro's flagship approached the trapped Hegemony command vessel. Half the extinction fleet found itself unable to maneuver or fire, while the other half struggled with cascading system failures as the altered physics wreaked havoc on their perfectly optimized systems. When Hegemony reinforcements arrived at the battle's edge, they witnessed something unprecedented, half their fleet powering down weapons and opening communication with the humans. Ship after ship, seeing the impossible had become reality, chose surrender over annihilation. Commander Trazek stood on the bridge of his captured vessel, mandibles twitching in confusion as Admiral Okoro entered with his multi-species command team. The Hegemony commander had expected execution, the fate his own species would have delivered to any defeated enemy. "Why not simply destroy us?" Trazek asked, genuine incomprehension in his compound eyes. "We would destroy you without hesitation." Okoro gestured to the Kantari, Delphian, and Zen officers standing alongside his human crew. "Because we're not fighting to replace your civilization with ours. We're fighting to create something that has never existed before." He approached the alien commander, close enough that the translator could operate at minimal volume. The Hegemony conquered through dominance hierarchy, subjugation or extinction. Humanity united the oppressed through mutual respect and shared purpose. The Admiral's expression hardened. "Your council believe humanity dangerous because we fight with unexpected ferocity. They misunderstood completely. We're dangerous because we can imagine a future different from the past, then make that imagination reality." On the tactical display, more Hegemony vessels signaled surrender as the extinction fleet's formation collapsed entirely. The combined alliance forces, human ingenuity, Kantari biology, Delphian mathematics, and Zen energy manipulation, had achieved what each species alone could never have accomplished. "Your civilization will not fall today," Okoro told the Hegemony commander. "But your empire of oppression has reached its breaking point." 1 year after the Battle of Earth, the newly constructed Harmony Station orbited a neutral star at the convergence of 4 territorial boundaries. Its architecture reflected a radical departure from Hegemony design philosophy. No species biology was privileged over others, no hierarchy embedded in its physical structure. Every chamber could adapt to the needs of its occupants rather than forcing adaptation to rigid standards. Ambassador Elena Chen stood at the center of the Grand Assembly chamber, surveying the gathered representatives. 32 species, former Hegemony rulers, liberated slave races, and independent civilizations drawn by the unprecedented events, occupied environmental modules arranged in a perfect circle. The physical symbolism was deliberate. No position of dominance, no higher seats, no lesser places. Elena bore scars from 3 assassination attempts by Hegemony loyalists who preferred death to change. She wore them openly, without regenerative treatment, as a reminder of the cost of transformation. Behind her, Admiral Okoro and Dr. Paddle stood alongside the Kantari Queen Mind, Delphian Calculation Prime, and Zen Elder Crystal, the founding members of what was about to become official. 1 year ago, Elena began, her voice carried simultaneously through atmospheric vibration, bioluminescent patterns, mathematical code, and crystalline resonance to reach each species in their native sensory modality. A conflict that began with human anger reaches its resolution not in vengeance, but in vision. The chamber's adaptive systems displayed images from the conflict, the destruction of the Constantine and Gagarin, the Battle of Europa, the Alliance formation, and finally, the breaking point where the Hegemony's extinction fleet surrendered. "Humanity's anger opened the door to revolution," she continued. "But anger alone builds nothing of lasting value. Today we establish the foundation for what will replace the fallen hegemony. Not another empire, but a true confederation of equals. The displays shifted to show the proposed structure of the Galactic Confederation, where the hegemony had enforced rigid specialization and technological restriction. The Confederation proposed open exchange, where subjugation had been the only relationship between stronger and weaker species. Mutual defense without dominance became the new principle. The Confederation establishes 3 core principles, Alina explained. First, technological sharing rather than hoarding. No species shall be denied knowledge that might allow them to advance. Second, cultural exchange rather than assimilation. Diversity strengthens us all. Third, mutual defense without hierarchy. An attack on one member is an attack on all, regardless of their size or power. The voting process began, each species indicating acceptance according to their own customs. The Cantari hive mind pulsed in unified agreement. The Delphians calculated approval through complex probability manifolds. The Zin crystals aligned their facets to capture and reflect light in the pattern of affirmation. One by one, former enemies became allies under a new compact. 4 of the 7 former ruling hegemony species joined, having seen the inevitable mathematics of their former empires collapse. The Vexarians, Mithrani, and Julani remained independent but non-hostile, retreating to their core worlds to contemplate their diminished place in the galactic order. As the session concluded and the delegates moved to the ceremonial exchange chambers, a lone Vexarian approached Alina. She recognized him as Third Speaker Kexel, once the 3rd highest authority in the Hegemony Council. Ambassador Chen, he began, mandibles lowered in what she now recognized as the first display of Vexarian humility ever recorded in diplomatic exchange. We studied your history before first contact. I'm aware, Alina replied neutrally. We saw your endless wars, your conflicts over resources and ideology, your division into competing nation-states, he continued. We concluded you would destroy yourselves before reaching the stars. We failed to understand that those same conflicts taught you to value peace more fiercely than species who never knew its absence. Alina considered his words. The hegemony created peace through dominance. Humanity learned that lasting peace comes only through equality and mutual respect, often the hard way, through our own failures. A perspective we lacked, the Vexarian acknowledged. My species has ruled for so long, we forgot what it meant to rise from nothing. As the first ships departed under the Confederation banner, mixed crews of former enemies embarking on joint scientific and exploratory missions, Admiral Okoro joined Dr. Patil at the observation deck. They thought we were dangerous because we fight with unexpected ferocity, Patil observed, watching the diverse species working together with growing familiarity. They never understood we're dangerous because we dream with unexpected hope. Okoro nodded, watching a human technician working alongside a Cantari engineer and Zin energy specialist to calibrate a new hybrid drive system. Technology that would have been impossible under hegemony restrictions. Anger may topple empires, he said quietly, but it's hope that builds civilizations. In the darkness between stars, the ships of the new Confederation accelerated toward unexplored regions of the galaxy. The message broadcast on all frequencies and sensory channels was no longer a warning of dominance to be enforced, but an invitation to join something unprecedented. A future where diversity was strength, where adaptation outpaced stagnation, and where former enemies stood as equals. The human anger that had begun the revolution had transformed into something far more powerful and far more dangerous to empires built on subjugation. It had become possibility.